Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Sears, Product Marketing Manager at Hortonworks. It has been my pleasure to host our 7-webinar series entitled Discover HDP 2.1, covering all the new capabilities for Enterprise Hadoop delivered in Hortonworks Data Platform version 2.1. Today's Using Apache Ambari to Manage Hadoop Clusters is the last webinar in the series. If you missed any of the previous 6 webinars, you can find those recordings, slide decks, and Q&As on our blog. Search for Discover HDP 2.1. I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by 2 Apache Ambari experts. Jeff Sposeti is a Senior Director of Product Management at Hortonworks. He is responsible for Apache Ambari in Hortonworks Data Platform and is also an Apache Ambari committer. Mahadev Konar is a Hortonworks co-founder and a committer and PMC for Apache Hadoop, Apache Ambari, and Apache Zookeeper. Here's today's agenda. We'll begin with an overview of Apache Ambari. We'll cover new Ambari features. We'll give a demo, and we'll finish with time for Q&A. We've got 30 minutes, so we're going to move quickly. All attendee phone lines have been muted. If you have questions during the presentation, please send them to Mahadev in WebEx chat. We will take time to answer those questions at the end of the call. If we do not have time to answer all of the questions, we will include a full Q&A in an upcoming blog post about this call. So let me set the stage for Jeff and Mahadev. This is a modern data architecture to store and process data from a wide variety of sources. Data comes in structured columnar formats and also newer, less structured formats like those found in human-generated content, such as Word documents or videos, in weblogs and clickstreams, in social content like tweets, and in machine, sensor, and geolocation data. You can see those data types down here. Apache Hadoop works well in combination with familiar data repositories like RDBMS, EDW, and MPP to store and process a full spectrum of data. That data is then available to a variety of data access applications and BI tools at the top of the stack to complete many different data workloads: batch processing, interactive query, stream analysis, NoSQL search, and others. Through our experience with more than 200 enterprise customers running HDP, we know that enterprises need data management and data access, as well as 3 additional capabilities. They need data governance and integration, they need to secure their Hadoop cluster, and they need tools to manage cluster operations. In today's webinar, we will focus on cluster operations with Apache Ambari. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff Sposeti. He will present the deck and show a demo. Please remember to send your questions to Mahadev in chat. He and Jeff will answer those at the end. Let me turn it over to you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Justin. So my name is Jeff Sposeti, and I'm the product manager here at Hortonworks for Apache Ambari.
Hey, Jeff. Okay, there we go. Now I can see your desktop. Thank you.
Here we go. Yep, just multitasking. There we go. We're all caught up. So really, I'm going to spend some time talking about Ambari, providing a brief overview about the project. We'll cover some of the specific new features that were released in Ambari, and then we'll do a brief demonstration so you can really see Ambari in action. So, first, want to spend some time and kind of step back and talk about the themes that really drive the Apache Ambari project. First, major theme is operating Hadoop at scale. So we really want to make it easier for people to run Hadoop and operate Hadoop at scale. And this means providing the operational control and monitoring insight for cluster health and performance so that it makes it easy on the Hadoop operator to run Hadoop cluster. And so, when we think about scale, we're thinking about scale really on 2 axes here. We're thinking about scale just in terms of sheer size of the cluster and, in terms of number of machines that you're trying to bring under management and monitor. But we're also thinking about scale in terms of size of the platform. So as, Hadoop as a data platform continues to grow and bring new technologies and data engines into the mix, we want to make sure that you can manage and monitor those components with consistency, and and Ambari can provide the single interface to do that. The second big theme that drives Apache Ambari is really about thinking how you can integrate with your existing enterprise investments. So as Hadoop has become a key component of the modern data architecture, Hadoop needs to work and complement the existing tools and skills you have inside of your enterprise. So that's really a key requirement of Hadoop from an operational perspective. So we approach that in a way unique to Ambari, so that you can basically bring Ambari into the mix with Hadoop into your modern data architecture, and then integrate it with your existing tools and systems. And then third, which is a really big point, is how do we actually make it easy to extend and customize Ambari so that we really support the ecosystem of not just the Hadoop data platform, but everything that might be coming from the community, from partners, and even complementary components that are going to join Hadoop in the modern data architecture so that they can bring it into Ambari. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how each one of these themes surfaces in Ambari, but this is really kind of the high-level 3 driving areas. So with those themes, what drives the project and what we end up putting together is really, Apache Ambari is a 100% open source framework for provisioning, managing, and monitoring Apache Hadoop clusters. So at the core of Ambari is the Ambari server. And out of the box, you get this server that can handle provisioning all the components of the Hadoop stack and really kind of rationalizes all the control and operational pieces of managing all the components inside of that stack. So it exposes a robust REST API, which is used by a really rich Ambari web client experience. So out of the box, you're able to take this server and use its web client to operate your cluster, but it also has this REST API for you to integrate with your existing tools and into your existing processes. And we've actually seen a lot of activity with using the API to integrate with existing tools. So in the community, Microsoft and other contributors have made a management pack available for System Center so that you can actually use Microsoft System Center Operations Manager and point at an Ambari server's REST API, and then you're able to see your cluster layout, gather metrics about the components in the cluster, and then have alerts wired up to the cluster through System Center. Our partners at Teradata have also used the Ambari REST API as a way to power the viewpoint experience, and really it simplified the way they can bring all the different metrics and component information together into the single viewpoint UI. So instead of having to do point integrations with each individual component in the Hadoop ecosystem, they were able to just focus on the REST API Ambari provided and do a single point integration. We've also had folks in the OpenStack community leverage Ambari to help deploy Hadoop clusters in an OpenStack environment. So with the REST API, people can actually go and perform cluster installs in a very repeatable and automated fashion. And this is perfect for an OpenStack environment where you're going to be creating clusters really at a customized pace. So there's just really kind of 3 examples of using the API and integrations with some of the existing tools and operational systems. Inside of the Ambari server itself, also want to highlight that there's fundamentally this concept of an Ambari stack, and that is the extension point. So you can bring more into Ambari and bring it under Ambari management so that you can actually customize and extend what Ambari can work with, and we'll spend some time talking about that too. But at the highest level, we're really looking at making sure we have a framework that's available, a single point of operational control, a really robust REST API for integration, a robust out-of-the-box web experience with a web interface that we'll demonstrate a little bit later, and then a customizable and extensible stack experience. So you can bring more under Ambari management beyond the Hadoop components. A brief history of the project. So it is 100% Apache open source. And so over the past year, the community has really grown at a rapid pace. So with new contributors and committers, has really helped advance the project greatly. And at the end of last year, Ambari graduated to become a top-level project in Apache. And specifically, the two most recent releases, and we're going to focus on the features and capabilities in these releases during today's webinar. There was a release in April of Ambari 1.5, which added support for the Hortonworks Data Platform 2.1. And then there was a release of Ambari 1.6, which just continued to extend operational and extensibility capabilities inside of Ambari. So let's actually dive into some of those features that are in the latest Ambari releases. So first we'll talk about some of the new features that are related to operating at scale. So we'll cover maintenance mode, rolling restarts, and Ambari Blueprints. And then we'll actually talk about a really important extensibility feature called Ambari Stacks. So with maintenance mode, it really gives you the ability from Ambari to silence alerts, whether for services or hosts, when you need to perform maintenance. So you can basically put a service or host out of service. You still retain full operational control of the service or host in case you want to do starts or stops or restarts or reconfigures. So you can still control the service at the granularity you always need to, but you're suppressing alerts during this maintenance period. So it really helps you in a large cluster where at any given time you could be working on different services and different hosts. It gives you a way to manage alerts and control the way you're informed of changes in the cluster when you know you're going to have to do work on the cluster. Just a typical operation that you're going to see when you're handling a cluster at scale. Rolling restarts is really an important capability, especially when you have a lot of hosts in the cluster and you want to try to manage the impact of making changes in the cluster. So using a rolling restart, you can actually manage how your services are impacted if you need to make configuration changes. So basically, the idea is you're able to make configuration changes and then in an automated way schedule the restart of components to pick up those configuration changes. And Ambari will give you the option to schedule those changes and the batch size and how that should all happen, so that ultimately Ambari will handle orchestrating that restart across the cluster, picking up all the changes, and then you can tune these parameters to fit best into your environment so you know what your service impact will be during this configuration change. So it really gives you a good way to handle operating and changing configurations of a cluster at scale. Ambari Blueprints is an API-driven feature. So it's really about being able to provision and create clusters in a consistent and rapid fashion. So since the Ambari release over a year and a half ago, we've had a wizard way of creating clusters. And during the wizard creation process, you're asked about your hosts, your components, your configurations. How do I want the cluster to look and lay out my name node here and my data node there? And you go through this, ultimately this questionnaire of how do you want to build a cluster, and then you ask Ambari to do the install for you. There are a lot of cases that we're seeing, whether people are building dev clusters or test clusters or just short-lived ad hoc use case type clusters where they want to automate that experience and they want to do it in a repeatable way. The Blueprints API helps you do that. So you can basically take the stack that Ambari is aware of and lay out the components and the configurations that you want for that cluster and define it as a blueprint. And then you can take that blueprint and give it to Ambari to say, go make me a cluster. And so you're able to really script and automate the way you end up building clusters. But another key benefit here is the blueprint actually captures, best practices on how you decide to lay out components and configurations. So in this single, very descriptive document, you can say, this is what a cluster looks like for this use case, so that you can actually share those best practices across your company. So, it helps with automating installs, but it also helps with sharing best practices of cluster layout and configurations. From an extensibility point of view, this was a really big feature for us to release in Ambari. This one actually was released in Ambari 1.5. So Ambari itself is actually, as it's controlling a cluster and operating on all the components in the cluster, it actually gets its definition of a cluster through a stack. And that stack defines really the consistent life cycle around all the components in the cluster, what it means to install them, start them, stop them, configure them, get status on them. And using that stack definition, Ambari is able to figure out what to do with components and then actually bring them into the cluster and control them in a consistent way. This also opens up the opportunity to extend stacks and bring your own services that will complement Hadoop. So you can actually bring them into Ambari by adhering to this stack definition. So you can actually dynamically bring new services and new components into Ambari and ultimately into your Hadoop cluster using this technology. So it's something that really is driven by a definition, which is an XML-based description of the service, and then control scripts, which you actually can customize and tailor based on the service you're bringing into the cluster. So it's a key extensibility point for us because it enables a lot of things to happen in the community for people to bring new stacks and services under Ambari and for partners to add new stacks and services to Ambari. And then a lot of our customers are using this to bring their own complementary components into Ambari. So with that, I actually want to switch over to perform a brief demonstration of Ambari so you kind of get a sense of the experience and some of the other capabilities that are available. So what I've actually done is switched over and have my web browser up, and I'm pointing to an instance of Ambari that I have installed already on my local machine. So the web interface of Ambari, I should point out, is a JavaScript application. So it is using the Ambari REST APIs to perform all the operations you're going to see me highlight in this demonstration. So it will give you a sense of how rich and robust the REST API is as I'm highlighting these features. So I'm actually going to go log into the Ambari web interface, and I should highlight that Ambari supports authentication against external LDAP and Active Directory, although it will ship with a default local authentication source, which is really useful to have available when you're doing proof of concept or just small use type clusters. But so as I come into Ambari and I've logged in, I land on the web interface, and I can quickly see the status of all the services I've installed into this cluster. So it's giving me a sense of all the different services that are running that I've installed and the health of those different services. And in this cluster, I've actually installed the Hortonworks Data Platform 2.1. So it includes all the core Hadoop components, HDFS, Yarn, MapReduce, Tez, as well as some of the newer components introduced in HDP 2.1. So Falcon and Storm are also installed into this cluster. When I performed my cluster installation with Ambari, it installed and wired Nagios into the cluster. So it pre-wires and defines a whole host of alerts that are watching everything from individual components running on hosts to service-wide metrics that give you overall pictures of health. And some of those metrics that those alerts are wired up to, we actually give you visual widgets here on the Ambari dashboard. So you can see things related to HDFS disk usage or name node CPU or data nodes live or RPC latency. So we have alerts that are wired up in the background, and we're surfacing these metrics here on the Ambari dashboard. Ambari also gives you the ability to display heat maps, so giving you kind of an overall cluster view of all the hosts that are operating, and getting some different pictures. In this situation, I actually have 3 hosts in this cluster, and I can go and create heat maps based on certain metrics, whether they're system metrics or they're service-specific metrics. So I can go and generate heat maps on those. There are many metrics that are emitted from Hadoop that Ambari ends up capturing and making available via its REST API. And so this is just a selection of them that we make available via heat maps in the web interface. Going and looking at individual services, a couple things to highlight here. So there's a summary about the service, so in this case HDFS. So I see information about the components that are running in HDFS. And in this case, I've configured name node HA. So I have an active name node and a standby name node, and the journal nodes are in the cluster supporting the name node HA capability. I also have information about HDFS itself, so uptime and heap size and data node status and things like that. I have information about all the different alerts we're watching, but related to HDFS service. So some of these alerts are related to the master components in HDFS. Some are related to the HDFS service itself, but there are just about a dozen different alerts we pre-wire to watch at the service level for HDFS, and this is pretty similar across all the different services. We also are highlighting certain metrics related to this service. So information specific to HDFS we roll up and make available via these widget graphs that show up on the service dashboard. So we can see things related to HDFS file operations and block status and RPC and things about the JVM happening on the name node. So I get a pretty good picture of what's happening with my HDFS service. And this is a similar experience across all the different services that are available. We have operational control of the service. So we can do stops, starts, restarts, restart data nodes, which is the initiation of the rolling restart feature there. And at doing these operations at the service level are really about orchestrating the start and stop and restart of the components that are part of HDFS. I can move components around in the cluster if I need to move my name node onto newer hardware to do hardware maintenance or a hardware refresh. Ambari has pre-wired service checks, so I can always just quickly check the health of a service. And in the case of HDFS, it just confirms it can put a file into HDFS and read it out. And then I have the ability to turn on maintenance mode for the service. From a configurations perspective, I can manage all the different configurations related to HDFS service, so core site and HDFS site in the case of Yarn site, and all those things across the board. And ultimately, we surface those in the UI and group them by components. And then there's always the ability to go inject custom properties into specific configuration files if I need to. We also support host group for configurations. So you can actually target configurations to specific hosts if you need to. And lastly, on this service page, I can always jump off to any of the component web properties as well. And in this case, since I'm running 2 name nodes, I have the ability to get to either the active or standby name node web properties. So this is pretty consistent across the board with the services. If I want to take a different view of my cluster and actually look at the hosts that are in my cluster, I can see in this cluster I have 3 hosts. I see the overall health of each host, so it's monitoring all the components that are running on that host. I get a sense that something's in maintenance mode, so I put HBase in maintenance mode, so I see that HBase is running on these components, but it is in maintenance mode, so I get a visual indicator there. I can always filter down to find my healthy hosts or any hosts that have maintenance mode components. I can do searches and filtering. I can also perform host actions, such as restarts, decommissions, recommissions, and bulk operations, so that's all available to me from the UI. I can also expand my cluster and go through and add hosts to my cluster if I need to from this interface. A quick look at a specific host. So in here, I actually have my HBase master. He is not running, but he's in maintenance mode, so I'm expecting him to not be there. but I'm not getting any alerts on it because I've put them in maintenance mode. I have metrics graphs related to the host, so CPU, disk, memory, things like that. And I have individual component control now, so I can do stops, starts, restarts, initiate moves, and things like that from this actual host page. I can also perform bulk actions against this host. So if I want to stop and start all the components, or put this whole host in maintenance mode, or actually take the host out of the cluster, I have that option available. New in Ambari 1.5 related to HDP 2.1 is a job visualizer when you're using Hive with Tez. So this gives you the ability to see queries that you've run through Hive and using the Tez engine. So you get a picture of really the execution plan that ran when you performed your Hive query against Tez. So here we can see the different map and reducer steps as part of the Tez operation. And then I can actually go and drill in and look at different metrics related to this to help me go and help analyze my query to know how to execute it with the Tez engine. Last thing to highlight in the demo, we've enabled named node HA in this cluster. Ambari does also support enabling Kerberos in the cluster, so you can actually enable Kerberos security for the components that are running in the cluster. So that will help you get your key tabs and principals and configuration and the configurations associated with that set up across all the different surfaces. So that was the brief demo of Ambari. And what I actually wanted to do was open it up and ask Mahadev, are there any questions in chat here we want to cover for everyone?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions we have. So the first one is, can we get some sample client code that uses Ambari REST API? So Jeff, do you have the URL to the wiki?
Yes. So great place to go is the Ambari wiki. So this is part of one of the Apache assets that's made available as part of the project. There's a section on this Ambari wiki page that has a bunch of samples of using the API as well as other information about Ambari, so the technology stack, how do you use stack definitions, how do you use the Blueprints API. So it's a really great resource to get information about all that.
So I also copy-pasted a URL specifically for using the API, just to add service, which shows add service, delete host, and all that. So you can just take a look at that and see if that helps. Also, the next question is, are we going to go through the existing features of Ambari, just like we went through the new features? Jeff, you want to comment on that?
Yep. So through the demonstration, we highlighted kind of a combination of the existing features and the new features. I am using what is the current shipping version of Ambari. So everything I showed you here is available today in the Ambari that's been released. The highlights that were shipped in individual releases, and if you want specifics on what features came in which releases, the Ambari wiki has a whole section on each release and what's new in each release, and there are also SlideShare presentation links that are there, so you can actually go through and see, on a per release basis, what's new, what the features are, and highlights. So there's kind of a running history on the wiki page and links to all those slide shares if you want those details.
Okay. So the next question is the UI HTML5. You want to take that, Jeff?
Sure. So some HTML5 bits, it's really completely, a front-end JavaScript app. So that the core of the JavaScript app, we're using Ember as the MVC framework, and Bootstrap and Handlebars for some of the UI presentation. So that's kind of the core technologies there at play.
Okay. So the next question is, can we also cover addition of a new node to the cluster? If you want to show small, just on the UI, if you have where you can add to cluster.
Yep, so I'll switch over here. So from the Hosts tab, I have the ability to walk through and add new hosts to the cluster. And so when I click that option, I basically would give it the list of hosts I want to add to the cluster. And Ambari actually gives you two options on how to bootstrap the agent on the machine. If you have SSH between the Ambari server and those machines, you can let Ambari server do the bootstrapping. So it'll connect via SSH, install the agent for you, and start the registration process. Or what we see is a very typical case is people have already pre-installed the agent on those machines, and they just perform a manual registration. So it expects the machines that already have the agent and already have registered. So you just walk through this wizard, choose that option, and then you're ultimately able to say, bring those hosts into the cluster. What components do I want to have on them? What configurations do I want to set up? And then it will go and do the package installs and start, and then they're joined the cluster.
All right, so the next question is, we show the UI for test. Is there a plan to add MR job info as well?
Yes, we are considering that. This UI is driven and served by the application timeline server component, which is new to Yarn. And I think the Yarn team is working with the MapReduce team to make sure that information is available. And once that information is available from that service, we'll uptake it in the UI.
Okay. And the last question is, are metrics available via the API? So this is the question I think Hari is asking. So I'll just take that, Jeff. So everything in the UI that you see that Jeff is showing is via APIs. So you should be able to get all the metrics and everything via APIs because the graphs are shown on the UI. So that should not be a problem. If you want specific APIs or specific metrics you're looking for, there is documentation on Wiki. You should be able to get that.
Okay. I think there may have been a couple more questions, but in respect for everybody's time, I'll remind everyone that we will post any unanswered questions on the upcoming blog post. So let me wrap it up. First of all, I want to thank Jeff and Mahadev. Thank you so much for taking time to share your expertise around Apache Ambari and Hadoop cluster operations and for giving that excellent demo. I also want to thank all of you attendees for taking time today to join us. As you can see in the slide, there are many ways to learn more about Ambari. You can visit our Cluster Operations Lab page on Hortonworks.com. You can learn about Ambari at the Apache Ambari project page or the Ambari wiki right here. You can get Ambari from our downloads page, or you can try it in the Hortonworks sandbox. And then one last thing I mentioned before, but I'll repeat it. You can watch our blog post on this event, and that will include a recording of the entire presentation, the slide deck, and a complete Q&A. I want to thank everyone for joining once again. This ends today's webinar. Thank you very much.